Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
5 years ago, I had to press charges against my own mother for stalking me and trying to frame me as a drug dealer. Let me give you some background first. My mother was always way too attached to me. She treated me more like a husband than a son, which was beyond uncomfortable. She'd get jealous of any girl I dated and would sabotage my relationships. When I finally moved out of state with my girlfriend, my mother completely lost it. She couldn't handle that I had chosen another woman over her twisted idea of what our relationship should be. My dad had no clue what was coming. My mother told him she was taking a vacation for her mental health and never mentioned where she was going. If he had known, he would have warned me immediately. But she kept him completely in the dark about her real plans. So there I was, living peacefully with my girlfriend in another state, thinking I had finally escaped my mother's controlling behavior. We had a nice little routine going and felt safe in our own home. We even kept a spare key hidden in one of those fake rocks outside just in case we ever locked ourselves out. What I didn't know was that my mother had boarded a plane and flown to my state. She spent several days following my girlfriend and me around, taking photos and videos with her smartphone. She was like some deranged private investigator, documenting our every move. Then she used our hidden spare key to break into our house while we were out. She went through everything, taking pictures of our belongings, our rooms, anything she could get her hands on. After she flew back home, my dad said she had this smug look on her face for days. He described it as the expression someone gets when they think they've won some big victory. She was unusually happy and giddy, but he had no idea why. That should have been a red flag. But my poor dad couldn't have imagined what she was planning. Then came the phone call that changed everything. My mother called the police from her own smartphone and reported that I was selling drugs. She claimed she had evidence and tried to make it sound like she was just a concerned citizen reporting criminal activity. What she didn't realize was that the call was being recorded and could easily be traced back to her phone. The police showed up at our door and I was completely baffled. I had never touched drugs in my life, let alone sold them, but they had received a tip and had to investigate. Fortunately, they found nothing because there was nothing to find. However, they did take the investigation seriously and started looking into who had made the false report. It didn't take long for them to trace the call back to my mother's phone. When they searched her device, they found all the photos she had taken while stalking us, including pictures from inside our house. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. On Christmas morning, the police showed up at my parents' house to arrest my mother. My dad said she completely broke down and insisted she hadn't done anything wrong. She kept saying she was just trying to help me, and that everyone was misunderstanding her motives. My dad was shocked and demanded to know what she had done. She kept crying and claiming she didn't do anything wrong, that she was just looking out for me. When my dad asked if she had really stalked me and called the police with false reports, she got defensive and said I needed to learn a lesson for abandoning my family for some girl. When the police confronted her with all the evidence, my dad said she just started crying and begging. She completely went limp and refused to cooperate when they tried to get her to stand up. They literally had to carry her out because she wouldn't move on her own. Nobody bailed her out of jail. She wanted to call me to beg for help, but apparently even she realized there was no way I would help her after what she had done. So she sat in jail for a while before finally using her own money to get herself out. She didn't try to run or hide. She genuinely believed she was justified in everything she had done and thought she could convince a judge that she was right. Her lawyer advised her to plead guilty and take a deal, but she fired him and decided to represent herself. That was her first big mistake. My girlfriend and I had to fly back to testify against her in court. I only stayed as long as absolutely necessary because being in the same room as her made my skin crawl. Throughout the entire proceedings, she kept staring at me with this mixture of pleading desperation and pure rage. The judge had to tell her multiple times to stop staring at me. When she took the stand to defend herself, She gave this unhinged speech about why she believed her actions were justified. She rambled about how she needed to teach me a lesson for refusing to come home and for putting some girl before her. She claimed that she should be the only woman I ever needed in my life. The judge kept having to redirect her attention because she wouldn't stop trying to stare at me while she spoke. Her whole defense was basically that she was just a concerned mother looking out for her son's best interests. Then my dad spoke up from the gallery. He said that if she was really looking out for me, she wouldn't have tried to make her own son into her second husband or frame me for crimes I didn't commit just because I refused her sick advances. That set her off completely. She started screaming at my dad, and the guards had to step in to keep them separated. The judge was getting more and more frustrated with her behavior. When it was my turn to testify, I decided to tell the whole truth about her behavior over the years. I talked about how she treated me more like a husband than a son, how she sabotaged my relationships, and how she had called my girlfriend an interloping witch who was interfering with some imaginary special bond she thought we had. I told the court that she always acted like we had some kind of inappropriate relationship, but that was all in her head. I never wanted any part of that twisted dynamic she created. Everyone in the courtroom except my mother looked disgusted by what I was describing. She just sat there crying as all eyes turned to her in horror. She tried to defend herself by insisting that we did have a special bond, and that I was her son who belonged with her. I shot back that this was exactly the kind of sick thinking I was talking about. I explained that there was never any special bond beyond a normal mother-son relationship, and even that was ruined by her behavior. She had a complete breakdown after that, and the court had to recess for the day. My girlfriend and I flew home that very night because I couldn't stand to be there any longer. The judge initially planned to be somewhat lenient because he thought she might be mentally ill, but when he suggested this, she went off on him. She insisted she was completely sane and that she was just a mother who was looking out for her son. The judge pointed out that her behavior suggested otherwise, but she kept arguing that there was nothing wrong with her and that everything she did was justified. Her outburst just made her look even more unstable. The judge decided she needed real punishment and sentenced her to 2 years in prison with 3 years of probation afterward. When she heard the sentence, she threw a complete tantrum like a toddler. She was pounding her fists on the table and crying like a baby. Once again, she went completely limp and refused to cooperate, so the guards had to physically carry her out of the courtroom. My dad later told me that the 2 years without her were absolute bliss. He made up his mind during that time that he would divorce her the moment she got out of prison. True to his word, he had the divorce papers ready on the day she came home and left the house for good that same day. He moved into his trailer and parked it at a friend's place while he fought the divorce proceedings. More crazy stuff about her came out during the divorce, and my dad eventually won. When he could, he moved his trailer to my state to be closer to me. Karen tried calling both of us after she got out, but we blocked every number she used. My dad spent some time just enjoying retirement on the coast, but eventually got bored and took a part-time job at a fish cannery. He says it pays the bills, and he's made good friends there. He's genuinely happy now, and I love seeing him that way. I visit him on weekends when I can. I haven't spoken a single word to her in 2 years. Every number she's tried to use to contact me gets immediately blocked. My girlfriend and I have built a peaceful life together, and we're not about to let her destroy that again. My dad is living his best life in his trailer by the coast, working when he wants to and spending time with people who actually care about him. My mother has never been one to take responsibility for anything. She's been unemployed for as long as I can remember, always finding excuses not to work. She's been living with her boyfriend for the past few years, and he's the one who pays for everything. The guy works minimum wage jobs and barely makes enough to cover their basic expenses, but somehow my mother always expects me and my siblings to bail them out whenever they need money. I'm the oldest of 3 kids, and I've managed to build a decent life for myself despite growing up with her drama. I have a stable job and some savings, which apparently makes me the family ATM in her eyes. My siblings and I have learned to be very careful about lending her money, because she has a history of making up stories and trying to manipulate us. So here's what happened recently. My mother called me out of the blue, sounding all stressed and panicked. She told me they were in serious trouble and needed my help right away. When I asked what was going on, she explained that her boyfriend had been charged with fraud, and they needed a lawyer immediately because the court date was coming up soon. I asked her what kind of fraud it was, but she didn't want to get into the details. She just said it was serious, and that they had gotten quotes from several lawyers and picked the cheapest one. She said she needed me to give her $3,000 total. When I asked her to break down the costs, she explained that $1,000 was for the lawyer's fee up front, and another $2,000 was for a community service program fee. The lawyer had told them he could probably get community service instead of jail time, but they had to pay for the program. I reminded her how little her boyfriend makes, maybe $1,500 a month on a good month. I told her that with that income, they should qualify for a public defender, which are free lawyers provided by the state for people who can't afford private attorneys. She immediately complained that public defenders are terrible and don't care about their clients. She insisted they needed a real lawyer. I told her that if she wanted my help with the money, she needed to prove to me that she at least tried to get a public defender first. I said she needed to apply for one, and if she got rejected, then I'd consider helping with the private lawyer. She reluctantly agreed and said she would call them right away. She called me back the next day with her story. She claimed she had spoken to a very nice lady at the public defender's office and given her all their information. According to my mother, the lady told her not to even bother coming in for an interview because they made too much money. She said she had asked for some kind of proof to show me, but the lady told her they don't provide documentation for rejections over the phone. Something didn't sound right about this. I had looked up the public defender's office online before our conversation, and their website clearly said that everyone has to come in for an in-person interview and bring documentation of all their income and expenses. I told her that didn't sound right and that their website said she had to come in person with documentation. I insisted she should just go to the appointment anyway. She kept arguing that they had already said she didn't qualify and that it was a waste of time. I made it clear that if she wanted my money, she was going to that appointment. A few days later, it was Sunday, and my mother was talking to my middle sibling. She told my second sibling that the boyfriend had gone to the interview that day and got rejected, just like she said he would. She complained that he had lost a whole hour of wages having to leave work for this pointless appointment, and that she had told everyone it was a waste of time. My second sibling started asking questions about what exactly they said when they rejected him, and how he managed to get an appointment on Sunday when government offices are closed on weekends. My mother started stumbling over her words and couldn't give a straight answer. She just kept insisting that the point was he got rejected. My second sibling called her out directly, saying she was obviously lying and that there was no way he had an appointment that day. When my second sibling told me about this conversation, I was done with my mother's games. I knew she was never going to actually go to the appointment unless someone physically dragged her there. Fortunately, my youngest sibling had some free time that week. I took $1,000 out of my savings account in cash and gave it to my youngest sibling. I told them they were only giving her this money if they personally drove her and her boyfriend to the public defender's office and sat through the appointment as a witness. My youngest sibling agreed and drove 3 hours to my mother's house. They laid down the law, telling my mother they were going to the public defender's office right then and there, or she wasn't getting any money. No excuses, no delays. My mother tried to argue, but my youngest sibling wasn't having it. They drove to the public defender's office, sat through the interview, and guess what happened? They were immediately approved for a public defender because the boyfriend makes so little money, just like I knew they would be. My youngest sibling drove back to my house and returned my $1,000 minus gas money for the 6-hour round trip. They confirmed that they got the free lawyer and were approved on the spot. The whole thing took maybe 30 minutes. My mother called me the next day with an unbelievable request. She acknowledged that they got the public defender, but said she still thought I should give her that $1,000. When I asked why I would give her money she didn't need, she explained that she could put it in an investment account and make some interest on it. Then she could pay me back later with the profits. I pointed out that she had lied to me multiple times, wasted everyone's time, and now wanted me to give her money to invest. She tried to defend herself, saying she wasn't lying but was just mistaken about some details. I reminded her that she had completely made up a story about her boyfriend having an appointment on Sunday when government offices are closed, and that she never intended to actually apply for a public defender. She started playing the family card, saying that family should help each other and that I was being unfair. I told her that family members don't lie and try to manipulate each other for money. She got angry and told me to be selfish but warned me not to come crying to her when I needed help someday. I replied that we both knew who was more likely to need help in the future, then hung up and blocked her number for a few weeks. A few months later, I found out through my siblings that the public defender actually got the fraud charges completely dismissed. My mother's boyfriend didn't even need to do community service or pay any fees. If they had gone with a private lawyer like she wanted, they would have been out $3,000 for the same result, or maybe even a worse outcome. My mother never apologized for lying or trying to scam me out of money. She actually had the nerve to ask my siblings to convince me to give her money for other made-up emergencies. But now they all know her pattern of behavior, and none of us fall for her schemes anymore. She still occasionally texts me asking for investment advice, as if I would trust her with a penny after she literally asked me to fund her imaginary investment account with money she didn't need for a lawyer she didn't require. I was a simple guy growing up who worked hard for his money. Back then, I was just trying to provide for my family and finally managed to buy our first home. I wasn't rich, but I was smart with money. I knew how banks worked. They loan you money for a house, then make you pay back almost double the amount over 30 years through interest. It always felt like legal robbery to me. When I bought our house, I got a loan from a small local bank called the DCB Bank. Everything was straightforward. I signed the contract, got my loan, and started making my monthly payments like clockwork. The contract was clear. If I ever had enough money to pay off the full principal amount, I could do so without paying any additional interest. That was the deal. Then 1997 hit us like a truck. The financial crisis destroyed many small banks across Malaysia. The Prime Minister stepped in and passed a bill forcing larger corporate banks to buy out the smaller ones to save the economy. Along with this, he created the One Malaysia Home Loan Policy. Under this policy, any big bank that bought a smaller bank had to send acknowledgement letters to all the home loan customers, explaining the transfer and new terms. The customers had to sign and acknowledge these new terms. My small DCB bank got bought out by RHB Bank Corporation. I knew this happened because everyone was talking about it. What I didn't know was that I was supposed to receive papers from RHB about my loan transfer. I never got anything. No letter, no acknowledgement papers, nothing. My original contract with DCB was still valid. Years passed. I kept making payments, but I never heard directly from RHB. Then in 2007, I finally saved enough money to pay off my entire loan principal. I was excited. This meant I could avoid paying decades worth of interest and own my house outright. I walked into the nearest RHB branch with my DCB contract and my money. The employee at the counter looked at my paperwork and told me that even if I made a full settlement, I would still need to continue making payments for the interest. I explained that I had a home loan contract under DCB that clearly said I could make a full settlement without paying additional interest. She insisted that since I had acknowledged and signed under RHB, the old terms no longer applied. I told her that I had never received any acknowledgement papers from RHB and had never signed anything with their bank. All I had was my original DCB contract. She tried to explain that under the One Malaysia Home Loan Policy, the transfer was automatic. I cut her off and demanded that RHB produce my signature acknowledging their new loan policy. Until they could show me proof that I had agreed to their terms, my original contract with DCB remained valid. The employee went pale. She started shuffling through papers, then called her colleagues over. For the next hour, I watched them tear through files and search their computer databases, looking for any trace of my acknowledgement signature. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. During this chaos, the branch manager called me into his office. He was a pompous man who clearly thought he could intimidate me into submission. He told me there seemed to be some confusion about my loan terms, speaking in a condescending tone. I responded that there was no confusion on my end since I had never signed anything with his bank. My contract was with DCB, and according to that contract, I could make a full settlement. He insisted that RHB had taken over all DCB obligations and that I had to follow their rules now. I demanded again that he show me my signature acknowledging the transfer. What followed was a shouting match that got so loud, people at the food stalls next door could hear us. The manager kept insisting I had to pay interest regardless of the settlement. I kept demanding proof of my acknowledgement. He couldn't produce it because it didn't exist. After going in circles for what felt like forever, the manager made his final attempt to force me into compliance. He told me in no uncertain terms that I still needed to make the interest payments, regardless of whether I made a full settlement. His voice was stern and final, as if his word was law. That's when I knew I had him cornered. I smiled and told him that I understood his position, but I would have to take this matter up with Bank Negara and let them help find that signature of mine. Bank Negara is Malaysia's central bank, the ultimate authority over all banking matters. The moment I mentioned them, the manager's arrogant expression crumbled. He knew exactly what I was threatening. If Bank Negara investigated and found that RHB had failed to follow the One Malaysia home loan policy properly, the bank could face massive fines and legal results. His career would be over. The manager's tone changed completely. He became polite and asked if I could please wait while he made some phone calls to upper management. For the next 30 minutes, I sat in that office listening to him make phone calls. I could hear bits and pieces, words like lawsuit, compliance violation, and Bank Negara investigation. Each call made him sweat more. Finally, he hung up and turned to me with a defeated look. He explained that after reviewing my case with upper management, they would accept my full settlement without additional interest payments. I wasn't done yet, though. I told him I also wanted my housing grant ready within the week. He asked about the housing grant, and I explained that since we were settling everything, I wanted all my documentation completed properly and quickly. He nodded weakly and agreed to everything. True to their word, within a week, I had everything sorted. I paid off my house completely and got all my paperwork in order. By avoiding those interest payments, I saved myself the equivalent of about $60,000. For a middle-class Malaysian family in 2007, that was basically a retirement fund. The irony wasn't lost on me. Banks make their money by exploiting people's lack of knowledge about contracts and legal obligations. But this time they tried to exploit someone who actually understood the system. Their own negligence in following the One Malaysia home loan policy properly became their downfall. I walked out of that bank branch that day as a homeowner with no debt and a pocket full of money I didn't have to pay in interest. The manager never made eye contact with me again. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.